Welcome friends. So, today we start another interesting lecture continuing in the tradition of discussing world cinema. We are going to talk about Canadian cinema as it is written over there. Canadian cinema which has its roots in cinema verite. I am sure you remember what is cinema verite, almost like a documentary kind of cinema, cinema which is true to life. These are the early filmmakers. We have to understand that in Canada there are two important languages, one is French and another is English. So, Canadian cinema always hops the boundaries between the two, two languages. So, it is a very bilingual kind of a cinema. So, the early filmmakers, and these are all French names, French Canadians, Pierre Perrault, Michel Brault, Claude Jutra and Giles Carle. So, they were francophones, and from the 70s onwards and also in the 80s, and some of these directors are also currently very active in filmmaking on the stage of world cinema. Denis Arcand, Patricia Rose, who is known for her feminist take in films, Atom Egoyan, an extremely important filmmaker. The focus of today's lecture will be on David Cronenberg and his cinema of body horror, and then you also have filmmakers such as James Cameron and Jason Reitman, who are of Canadian origins, but who have made it very big in Hollywood, while still retaining their Canadian roots, particularly in the case of Jason Reitman. The Canadian Pacific Railway set up a film unit in 1900. However, it was in 1939 when a National Film Board of Canada was established under John Grierson to counter the challenge posed by Hollywood. We have to remember this concept very clearly, that Hollywood has always been a very major threat to Canadian cinema. See, we are talking about North American continent, Canada and the United States of America, they share the border, and it is very easy to travel between the two countries and get permission to work in each other's territory. So, filmmakers from Hollywood have always utilized this opportunity. Many of their films are shot in Vancouver, because it is easy to shoot there, permission is given easily, and infrastructure is readily available. So, many of the Hollywood filmmakers prefer to shoot their films in Vancouver. However, all these films which are shot in Canada, they are British products, they are Hollywood products, and as Hollywood cinema, as most of us know, has taken over the world stage, and it is very difficult for the indigenously produced films to get attention. So, Canadian cinema has always struggled and is still struggling to counter the challenges posed by Hollywood. Now, the board, we are talking about the National Film Board, it built up a department of animation, and after the Second World War, francophone Canadians made cinema verite kind of films. Among the leading filmmakers of this category were Pierre Perrault and Michel Brault, names are written over the board. Soon, French Canadian filmmakers became a major force in the Canadian film industry, such as people like Claude Jutra, Giles Carle and Denis Arcand Sr., some of the greatest filmmakers since the 70s. Some of them are still, like Denis Arcand, are still extremely active. Again, and I quote here the great Atom Egoyan, to be a Canadian filmmaker is to exist in the shadow of Hollywood. That is a bitter truth that exists. Very often an average cinegoer, he does not even know the difference between a Hollywood product and a Canadian product. Canadian films are extremely difficult to market and distribute across the world. We rarely get to see Canadian cinema except in let's say film festivals. So, that is the reality of it. Coming to the great filmmakers, Atom Egoyan, he is known for his thoughtful exposition on alienation, displacement and the amorphous nature of home and family. Family is extremely important in the films of Atom Egoyan. His films incorporate innovative narrative devices of circular structure, and they are quite reflective, introspective kinds of films. You do not find too much of hysteria or hyperventilating even amidst great tragedy in an average Atom Egoyan films. He has also done a lot of work for Canadian television, particularly documentaries with musical subjects. His best known film is A Sweet Hereafter, which is based on a novel by Russell Banks, where an insurance man comes to a locality traumatized by a recent event involving a bus accident, a tragedy. And it is one of his best known films, one of his greatest films, and a very well received film. I strongly recommend that you watch Sweet Hereafter. His most recent film is Devil's Knot. I think it is a 2013 film which stars Hollywood stars Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth. And again, as I was trying to prove a point that Canadian filmmakers have to look towards Hollywood to generate interest in their films. Here is a clipping from Atom Egoyan's film Ararat. Denis Arcand is known as the godfather of the new Canadian cinema and has made satires on Quebec society such as Jesus of Montreal and the Barbarian Invasions. In his Decline of the American Empire, which is a 1986 film, a group of Quebec intellectuals discuss the problems of success, fidelity, intimacy and aging. Now, Jesus of Montreal is an important film. It was fascinated, the director actually was fascinated with the lives of Montreal based artists who made a living as biblical figures by night. They would act out performances, public performances based on biblical stories, and by daytime they would work in beer commercials and very commercial kinds of films. Okay, so he was fascinated by this dichotomy. Now, the protagonist of Jesus of Montreal is played by one of the greatest star actors of Canada, that is Lothar Bluto, and he is Daniel Coulomb in the movie. He is engaged by a Montreal priest to improve on the parish's representation of passion play. Passion play, you know, as in life and suffering of Jesus Christ. So, plays based on that, but the parish and the priest feel that people are losing interest in this kind of theatrical form and something new has to be done. So, they approach new blood, new kinds of actors, new kinds of theatre exponents who can infuse new energy into something that has been going on and on for a very long time, and general public is losing interest. So, Daniel is excited. He is a very quiet man, a very good actor, but not very flamboyant. He is excited by the possibility, and he invites a group of old friends to join him in revitalizing the ancient tale. So, together they stage the performance by torchlight on the crest of Mount Royal with the lights of the vast city flickering below. So, it is very well photographed film. You know, you have to just watch the film for its beauty of cinematography, its Brechtian devices, and also its excellent plot. So, as Daniel and his friends revise the script, they make it more modern and engage the audience. The actors all manage to improve their personal life situations. Okay. A man, for example, gives up dubbing scripts for commercial kinds of films. A woman leaves an abusive partner while she is playing Magdalene. And so, they start living or embodying the characters. Daniel, of course, starts acting like Jesus himself. The play is a huge success, but soon clerical authorities are disturbed by the very experimental and avant-garde performances. In the absence of support from the priest, the local authorities revoke the right to perform. It is issued, an order is issued that they cannot perform the play anymore. Now, the troupe gets extremely defiant and they perform anyway. However, during, and this is very interesting, during the crucifixion scene, fight takes place between the authorities and the theatre group, and Daniel suffers an accidental head injury. So, he is taken by ambulance to a busy hospital where he is neglected for a while. He manages to discharge himself from the hospital, but collapses in a subway station. He is again taken to a hospital where he finally dies. It is a tragic story, but beautifully told. Here is a clipping from Jesus of Montreal. Patricia Rose is known for making films which are saturated with feminist passion, and it has actually, she has broken new grounds, especially in the world of art house cinema. Most Canadian cinema is art house. Okay, they have a strong message, they have a strong sense of social consciousness. Patricia Rose is, she tells us the story or struggles faced by women in their day-to-day life. She made her debut in 1987 with a film called I Have Heard the Mermaid Singing. This is a story of an unfulfilled 30-something single woman living in Toronto. It was also a film that Rosema wrote, co-produced and edited, and the movie won excellent reviews. She is also known for her 1999 adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Mansfield Park, and the film became very controversial. You have to watch it to understand this. David Cronenberg, which who I am going to concentrate on in today's lecture, is one of the most successful Canadian filmmakers. He makes his films from Canada, but he has mastered the art of balancing art and commerce. An extremely conspicuous presence in world cinema since the commercial success of his film Scanner. The English speaking Canada has never been very comfortable with Cronenberg. Now, it could be that his films very carefully tread the boundary between art and commerce, and he is not what an average Canadian filmmaker would be. His films always try to break certain new boundaries, but there is always a desire to be commercially successful at heart. He is an extremely original filmmaker, and he is interestingly enough, he has not received great reception from his homeland, but is happening now. But for a large part of his career, he was by and large ignored by Canadian critics for some unexplainable reason. He is often called, a very interesting nickname is given to him, that is Dave Deprave. Now, he is also called the Baron of Blood. He is one of the principal originators of what is now commonly known as the body horror genre of filmmaking. which explores people's fears of bodily transformation. He has made a number of shockers, and some of the early shockers are Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners and Videodrome. His subsequent films include The Dead Zone, The Fly, Dead Ringers, Naked Lunch, which is based on William Burroughs' novel, Madama Butterfly, Crash and Existence. So, these are his films, all during the 80s and the 90s. These films have increasingly tended to downplay body horror in favor of aesthetic and psychological contemplation, while his Existence is a reprise of many of his themes and concerns. He is a staunch Canadian filmmaker nevertheless, with nearly all his films, including his major studio vehicles such as The Fly. Okay, all these films have been filmed in his home province, that is Ontario. Notable exceptions remain as Madame Butterfly and Spider, films which were shot in China and England respectively. Now, Rabid and Shivers were also shot in and around Montreal. Most of his films have been at least primarily financed by Telefilm Canada, and Cronenberg is a vocal supporter of government backed film projects, saying every country needs a system of government grants in order to have a national film cinema or national cinema in the face of Hollywood. Okay. Now, Hollywood remains a major concern, but somehow David Cronenberg has managed to work around his way. Now, coming to his very popular, very successful and highly acclaimed Dead Ringers. It is a 1988 film. It had the great actor star Jeremy Irons in a double role, and the Montreal based French Canadian actor Genevieve Bujold, she was the heroine. It falls under the genre of medical horror and is adapted from the true crime novella Twins, which is a documentation of the Mendel twins, two New York gynecologists twins who committed suicide. Okay, they were facing charges of malpractice and they committed suicide. So, that is a very disturbing kind of a plot. Now, the movie has Jeremy Irons playing the twin doctor brothers Elliot and Beverly. They are not complete in themselves, sort of complete or complement each other. Both characters have a feminine touch in them. Okay, and the idea is that Elliot attracts more women, has a greater facility with the superficiality of the everyday life, particularly with women. But in terms of establishing emotional connect with women, Elliot is very unsuccessful. On the other hand, Beverly scores on this account, but he does not see this as an achievement. Instead, he views this as another part of his weakness. The movie is set in Toronto, 1988. Actually, it begins with the information Toronto, 1988, and Cronenberg is very specific about the location. Here the male mind and the female body are explored in the most literal of senses, avoiding prudish sensibility. Cronenberg always had a passion for science, and Dead Ringers partly seem to stem from Cronenberg's lifelong passion for science, especially biochemistry. We get a glimpse of the director's autobiographical impulses when we see the Mantle twins in the initial scenes of Dead Ringers, whose fascination with the mysteries of human body is obvious by their early experiments in gynecology. Dead Ringers, in a true Cronenberg style, explores an idea of imposed order. With its blue lit examination theatres, sterile red gowns in the operation theatre and polished penthouse surfaces in the shades of white and blue and grey. So, colors are important in Cronenberg, and nowhere do colors play such an important role as in Dead Ringers. Again, you have motifs such as insects in the form of a specialty commissioned set of surgical steel instruments, again illustrating Cronenberg's juxtaposition of the unassailably human with inhuman. This kind of cinema can also be called the womb envy cinema, where the doctors specialize in the area of female fertility, and later they become obsessed with the heroine of the film played by the actress Genevieve Bujold, and she is a mutant woman. She has some problems related to her gynecological health. What begins as a distraction for the brothers turns into a dangerous game, leading to their descent in jealousy, rivalry and self-destruction. Elliot's passion for Claire and Beverly's discomfort with his twins' love life and the brothers' subsequent descent into self-induced misery forms the crux of the plot. The film implies that there are two bodies with one soul, and it takes a very graphically violent sequence or turn when the twins are depicted organically joined like Siamese twins. It is almost like an expressionistic device and it's a dream sequence. As Elliot increases his dependency on drugs, he starts taking sleeping pills and all. Beverly plunges into guilt. He blames himself for destroying his brother. They use their band instruments to kill themselves. At the end, both are found dead. Dead Ringers, like most Cronenberg films, evoked a deep sense of shock among the audience. Again, I am talking about the body horror genre. The film was particularly praised for its sophisticated acting and cinematography. According to Janet Maslin, among the film's more hauntingly strange developments are Beverly's invention of a new set of surgical devices which frighten everyone who sees them, the brothers' growing identification with the Siamese twins Chang and Eng, and the drug addiction that finally leaves one brother utterly oblivious to the siblings' fate. These are the scary points of the story. Crash was another controversial film. It is a 1996 film starring James Spader, Deborah Unger and Holly Hunter. It falls under the category of speculative fiction. So, Cronenberg here explores his passion for the automobile. See, automobile is a very important motive in all, especially literature and cinema from the North American continent. We have had great literature based and great cinema based in and around cars. Okay, so cars are very important part of integral part of the Western culture, especially the late 19th, early 20th and 21st century culture, and many films have focused on cars as a motive. Okay, there is a research waiting to be done there, although a lot of people have done some work there, but perhaps some of you who are interested in doing this kind of work can explore this cars in cinema. Okay, so here again Cronenberg explores his passion for the automobile. The film is adapted from J.G. Ballard's 1973 novel Crash, and here Cronenberg documents the nature of human tendency and his fascination with the limits to which individual can push himself or can bear to endeavor to possess what they desire. So, the film's mood is essentially cold and grey under the metallic grey palette. So, the movie has again steel grey palette, almost mirroring the state of minds of the characters. The focus is on James Spader's character. He is a television commercial actor, and he has a wife played by Deborah Unger. In the first crash, we see James collide with another car on a freeway because he is looking at a set of storyboards while driving. The crash is over in a flash, and we find the other driver dead on the hood of James's car. The dead man's wife, as played by Holly Hunter, Helen, is injured. Soon they get acquainted with someone called Vaughan, a survivor of multiple crashes. He introduces James, Helen and Catherine. Catherine is his wife, to an entire cult built on fascination with car crashes. So, this is an important part. J.G. Ballard says, talks about Crash as, throughout Crash I have used the car not only as a sexual image, but as a total metaphor for man's life in today's society. As such, the novel has a political role. So, at its core, Crash is a complex and frightening look at where the predictability and innovations of modern life have led us, and at how dull our overstated senses have become, oversaturated senses have become. Again, like the book, the movie is a cautionary tale. At the heart, it is a cautionary tale of how we might adapt to the environment that we have ourselves created, sterile and alienated from nature. So, that is the moral. See, beneath the strong graphic and violent content, there is a message that, and message could be the apocalyptic view of the world, that we are all becoming more mechanized and alienated, increasingly alienated from each other. We are losing the human connect. Crash thus unfolds without moral judgment, presenting an unflinching vision of modern wild, all sort of jungle, a modern jungle, a kingdom, man-made concrete and metal. This is what we have created for ourselves, and this is what Cronenberg draws our attention to. So, we have to remember there is a thin line of demarcation between what could be considered extremely graphic and moral, and here using certain graphic imagery he presents us with an extremely moral and cautionary tale. Again, like most Cronenberg's films, Crash and Dead Ringers, they are not for the weak hearted. Crash was received well, particularly at the 1996 Cannes Film Festival, and it got a special jury award for originality, audacity and daring. Such a response from the judges of that prestigious event and a substantial amount of critical acclaim from other quarters did not prevent Crash from being banned in England and having its release in the United States delayed by nearly 6 months. It is still banned in the Westminster section of London on the grounds that it would encourage something called road rage. That is Cronenberg for us. Politically, he is extremely active. In 1995, he met Salman Rushdie. At that point, still deep in hiding from the fatwa issued against him, and interviewed him at length for the Canadian magazine Shift. The similarity between the two could be due to the fact that Cronenberg too has experiences with moral vanguards and Puritans trying to prevent his art from finding an audience. In terms of its mass marketability, Crash started out by hitting a lot of people in the wrong way. It could not be shown in certain countries, and it served for much lively debates, and it still sparks lots of debate on its content. In 2005, Cronenberg made a big budget studio style film, A History of Violence, starring Viggo Mortensen. Many of his loyal fans were disappointed. They felt that he has sold out to commerce, but then still the film is extremely entertaining, and at the core it retains the essence of Cronenberg, that is his enduring interest in the physical bordering on the metaphysical. Here is a scene from A History of Violence. His next big film was Eastern Promises, about Russian mafia based in London, starring Viggo Mortensen and Vincent Cassel, the great French actor. Viggo Mortensen and Vincent Cassel again appeared in Cronenberg's A Dangerous Method, which is an adaptation of Christopher Hampton's play The Talking Cure. The movie also starred Keira Knightley and Michael Fassbender. The film focused on the relationship between Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and a troubled Russian woman named Sabina, as played by Keira Knightley, who went on to become one of the first female psychoanalysts. Another interesting movie by Cronenberg is Cosmopolis, which is a 2012 movie which is based on Don DeLillo's novel. The film functions as an urban road movie, and it's set largely, the action takes place largely in the hero's head. While he is driving in his limousine, he is a filthy rich Wall Street person, almost in the category of Sherman McCoy from The Bonfire of Vanities. It's a novel, and also there is a film based on the novel, and again Gordon Gekko as played by Michael Douglas in Wall Street, that is an Oliver Stone film. So, all these Wall Street bigwigs, and again our hero here played by Robert Pattinson, who plays a character called Pecker, and Pecker is going in his limousine on a long day's journey. The purpose of his drive is seemingly to get a haircut at some old traditional place which he used to frequent in his childhood. So, that is the reason we are given, but then during his time in the car, during his journey in the car, he appraises his life. For much of the time he is in the car packed with computer screens flashing out the latest financial information from around the world. Occasionally he leaves the car to visit an old kind of bookshop, a theatre, a diner, a hotel, and a sense of angst and paranoia starts building up. So, again coming to Cronenberg, the questions that interest him now remain the same as ever. How permeable is the borderline or the human body between one person and another, between one person and the natural world, and our attempts to find new places in which to breach that border, including telepathy, love, gene splicing, surgical invasion, other kinds of transgression. Are these heroic, or are they leading us towards our future doom? Cinegoers, cinephiles have come to terms with Cronenberg's point of view, where he says, I think that is a primary function of art, and which is to do violence to the little cocoon that we sometimes find ourselves enveloped in. So, that is Cronenberg for you. Another great director from Canada, of Canadian origin, is James Cameron. Of course, all of us are extremely familiar with James Cameron. He has made some of the biggest money making and blockbuster kinds of movies in recent times, such as Terminator Part 1, Part 2, Titanic, Avatar, and before that there was Aliens. So, I will move on to talk now about Jason Reitman, who is Montreal born and known for directing Thank You for Smoking, starring Aaron Eckhart. He earned Academy Award nomination for his Juno, which is a delightful film with Ellen Page, and Up in the Air, starring George Clooney. He also directed a young adult starring Charlize Theron. Although Reitman is known for his Hollywood hits, he maintains his Canadian roots and he does produce Canadian films or shoots on location somewhere in the nation. Each of his films has played at the Toronto Film Festival. Reitman has been extremely encouraging of young Canadian filmmakers. His Canadian root and heritage is especially reflected in his writing and directing choices, especially in the use of subtle humor and deadpan. Like a true Canadian filmmaker, he is also interested in cinema with a strong social message, although his films are extremely popular, money making films, and they are accepted by all. They have a worldwide visibility. So, this is one director who has managed to straddle the two worlds very successful. He has touched on forbidden topics such as teen pregnancy and smoking, as in Thank You for Smoking, job loss, for example, in Up in the Air. Here is a scene from Thank You for Smoking, it's 2005 film. So, thank you very much. We will continue in our next class.